joining us again. I want to invite Professor Ron Gregg to be giving the opening notes and a small speech for us today. Please welcome him.
Hi, thank you. Should I? Thank you. Hi, I'm Ron Gregg, Director of the MA program in Film and Media Studies in Columbia School of the Arts. And I welcome you to this final roundtable panel. But before turning this over to the moderator, Aciah Abdulsater, I just want to thank our sponsors and also the LinFest staff for assisting us putting on an incredible production here. Thank you. But as far as our sponsors, their support, made these screenings and the roundtable possible, and also allowed Aciah to gather the filmmakers here today for the roundtable. Along with our own program in Film and Media Studies, we'd like to thank Columbia's Middle East Institute, with special thanks to Associate Director Astrid Benedek, who helped Aciah with many of the arrangements. We would equally like to thank Columbia Global Centers, Amman, for their support, and particularly the Senior Program Manager, Ahmad Al-Musa. We would also like to thank the Beirut Film Society and the founding chair, Sam Lahoud, who is joining us for the roundtable. Finally, I want to acknowledge Aciah Abdulsater, who brought the concept for this program to me almost a year ago. Without her vision, the tenacity to push through certain institutional doors at Columbia, which are sometimes hard to open, and patience with myself and other administrators who could be slow to act, sometimes to her emails. She was very patient. I knew she was determined. She believed in this event, approaching me a year and finally happening right now. But it was not until the films, seeing them today, that I grasped the urgency and anguish behind the vision for today's screenings and conversation. So, Aciah, thank you for introducing me to this incredible work, to all of us to these incredible work and these filmmakers. And please join me in thanking her very much. And that's my portion. I'm going to turn this over to Aciah, who's moderating the roundtable and will introduce the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I would love to ask our panelists to join me in the center of the auditorium, please. Woo! So thank you, Professor Gregg, for that very warm welcoming note, and I really appreciate your words. They mean so much to me. Hello everyone. To introduce myself, my name is Aciah Abdulsater, and I'm a Lebanese American MA student at the Film and Media Studies program at Columbia University. As Professor Gregg said, I started organizing and working on this event for over a year ago, and to see it come together today is very heartwarming and overwhelming at times. But before we start off, I do want to introduce our panelists, and we will be having two other panelists joining us through Zoom shortly. But to start off with our filmmakers, I want to introduce Ghassan Halwani. Ghassan Halwani lives and works in the capital of Lebanon, Beirut. He completed his first short film, Gibraltar, in 2005. In the aftermath of the 2006 Israeli war on Lebanon, and having spent most of his life in war times, he was unable to find a match between the materiality of the war and its inflicted atrocities, and the nature of the representativity of artworks. So at the time, he withdrew the artist filmmaking career and chose to work with and for other Lebanese and Arab artists and filmmakers to sustain his economies. Among his many collaborations is a short animation for the feature documentary Lebanese Rocket Society, by Joanna Haji Thomas and Khalil Jurej, as well as the short animation for the feature film 1982 that we had the pleasure to screen today. And most recently in 2020, Ghassan completed the film They No Longer See in Land Anything But Square Meters in collaboration with Public Works Research Studio. Oualid Mouaness is an award-winning Lebanese-American director, writer, and producer. He's a Sundance Institute Fellow and has called Los Angeles home for over 2 decades. He completed his undergraduate studies in journalism and theater in Beirut and holds an MFA in film from the Florida State University College in Motion Picture Arts. He has produced 9 feature-length films, most notably the indie film Kitchen Privileges, and which he co-produced and edited, as well as the acclaimed documentary Rise, which was shortlisted for the Oscars in 2006. His most recent works are 1982 and Max Richter's Sleep. Oualid is also known for producing music videos with artists such as Rihanna, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, among others. And over the years, his films and productions have been nominated for an Emmy, Music Video Awards, and Country Music Awards in the US. Soha Shukayr, who will be joining us through Zoom shortly, I believe. Not yet on screen, but Soha lives and works in Beirut, where she earned a bachelor's degree in communications arts with an emphasis on radio, television, and film from the Lebanese American University in 2011. Yes, Soha now is on screen with us. We're happy to have you with us, Soha. So, Soha works independently as a director for commercial television ads and music videos. In 2017, she co-founded Cutting Boards Films, a multi-service post-production house. As a freelance editor in film, television commercials, and video clips, she has worked with well-known artists on numerous projects in Lebanon and other Arab countries. And lastly, among our filmmakers, we have Elijah Ghossein joining us in person. Elijah is a Lebanese-American artist, aspiring technician. He has written, produced, and performed in a variety of production, creative projects, and is currently exploring more entertainment mediums while pursuing a bachelor's degree in computer science. Also joining us through Zoom is Sam Lahoud. Sam is a lecturer in film, theater, and media at Notre Dame University in Beirut, in Lebanon, and a filmmaker whose feature film, Waynun, Void, was the Lebanese official submission for the Oscars in 2015 for Best Foreign Language Film. Mr. Lahoud is also the founding chair of Beirut Film Society, a kind sponsor of today's event, and the founder of many reputable film festivals across Lebanon, and a founder and program director at the Lebanese Film Festival in Canada. And last but certainly not least, Nico Baumbach. Professor Baumbach is an assistant professor at Columbia University's School of the Arts. He holds a PhD in literature from Duke University. His research and teaching focus on critical theory, film theory, documentary, and the intersection of aesthetics and political philosophy. And he's currently working on a book titled The Anonymous Image. So I do want to start off the panel by giving the vision behind this event. Lebanon is living in a complex present, to say the least, and its future is hence uncertain. Today's program comes at a critical time when the Lebanese, myself included, are thinking with much seriousness of the future of Lebanon and our future and our futures at home. Although the selected titles do not address these worries up front, all films revisit, reflect, and/or address moments of national turmoil and leave us with questions as to how one should proceed in life. Before heading into today's discussion on questions of trauma, memory, and temporality in our screen titles, I wish to first turn to you, Mr. Lahoud, to touch more broadly on Lebanon and cinema. So I do have a few questions. The first thing is that, would you kindly describe in brief both the commercial and the more independent cinema scene in Lebanon? And secondly, would you say that there are popular genres and themes in Lebanese cinema, and could you generalize about the typical audience member?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Aciah, for this opportunity. And thank you for Columbia University for hosting us, and for all those who are dedicating time to listen to this panel. And also, I would like to thank my co-panelists, all the directors and professors being there, especially Oualid and Ghassan. They are very dear friends. In fact, as this is a very critical question, if we can define that we have already Lebanese cinema or not. And definitely I will not be lecturing on this. We'll be sharing some ideas, my thoughts, and the thoughts of my colleagues, who of course will enrich the discussion with their statement or understanding. I consider that in Lebanon we have a group of filmmakers that started since more than 50-60 years, dreaming of creating a certain industry for the cinema in Lebanon. And those experiments or those experiences varied between the far commercial, let's say, and the far postal films, and what is in the middle between them. So you can see the same. It's not like we are not discovering the wheel. This model is applied or is present in a lot of cinemas around the world. In the majority of cinemas, we can mention Eastern Europe, that is close to us and somehow similar to our cinema. Even European cinema in general, Latin America, Canada even, all the African cinemas, if there is any industry in Africa, except outside Egypt and Nigeria and some unique experiences of commercial cinema. So let's cut it short. Lebanon is not a unique case. It's similar to a lot of cinemas in the world where there are people who are trying to make a certain identity for the cinema. Maybe we may say that the identity of the Lebanese cinema is that there is no identity, no particular identity. So we have filmmakers who are trying to make it on their own, and each one of them can sign their films in a certain signature. So we can see since the early George Nasser, then we have Baumbach. I'm just mentioning a couple of names, Burhan Alawiye in the first generation or second generation, and then you have the third wave that came during the war, and then the post-war, until you have now the cinema of the youth, all filmmakers that are between the late 30s and early 50s. So this group of filmmakers who are somehow establishing a certain cinema in Lebanon, that I can mention, like Oualid is one of them, and definitely those filmmakers, like they produced maybe one or two or three films in their career so far, 3 feature films. And also we have to highlight the short film industry, which is very wide. We have a lot of production of short films, either with students, because we have a lot of film schools in Lebanon, or some independent filmmakers who are trying also to produce their first and second short film. And on the second side, we have also now in Lebanon, and it was even in the 60s and the 70s, the commercial cinema, the cheap commercial, let's not use the word cheap, let's say the far commercial, so it's on the extreme commercial films. In the 60s, it was very popular with the collaboration between Egypt and Lebanon. And even in the last 2 decades, we can see a lot of commercial films that end by being screened on in the theaters. They are somehow a reflection of the TV industry with TV stars and directors, but they have a good portion of the audience in the theaters. I will stop here because the topic is very wide. It's just to give the audience like what we have. We have some the far commercial, the extreme commercial, and the extreme author film. Like now we have the cinema of Ghassan, who is a very well respected filmmaker in Lebanon, and he has a certain genre he works on. And we have Beirut and other names. And there is the cinema in the middle, which is a notion cinema, however, somehow popular and can be accepted by the mass audience. So it balances between the commercial, so it's popular, and the author films, the extreme. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lahoud. So I do want to move into the discussion and to talk more specifically with our filmmakers. And I will start by addressing questions to the film Erased Ascent of the Invisible. So it is interesting how in the beginning the animated figures are walking towards an unknown destination. Yet even this motion comes to a point where it begins to seem as though it is in place. What comes out of this sensation of being stuck or in a loop? And what does it say about the experience of time and temporal states? Whose experience of time are you, Ghassan, trying to universalize or project? Is it your own subjective experience or what you believe is the reality of the Lebanese experience of time?
Oh, it's a complicated question. Well, there was something related to this animated scene and the length of it. There was something technical. It was to allow actually for the audience when they come in the theater to rest and to put their strength and to give them this time before entering into the film. I didn't make any actually thoughts on or reflections on the specificity of time, but now since we're talking, there's certainly a big specificity to the time of. It's not related to the locality of Lebanon, but it's more related to the materialist condition of what we are talking about, which is in this case a disaster. And in that case, it's a disaster that is also very much related to the notion of time, because this type of crimes are, as you know, very much related to the waiting. So I think, yeah, time that was proposed not only in that opening sequence, but time that was proposed along the film was also somehow employed in order to provide the sense of time that is related to the condition of the missing and the condition of the waiting. And this, again, is not a local condition, but it's related to the materiality of the crime, and in this case, the crime of the kidnapping.
I do want to follow up on the question of animations because I'm very interested in your use of animation and drawings in your film. So what exactly are you putting in motion or giving life to? What is the commentary being made through such a creative treatment of the past and its actuality, since imaginative work is often paired with future or the trials for perception?
So basically, as my bio says, that I worked in animation in order to sustain my economies, and so basically I enjoy very much, and I think everyone who exerts a certain profession that likes would directly jump into exercising this job. So as things pushed me to work on this film, I was certainly opting very easily to do animation and even make the whole film as an animation. No, not really, but actually the first thing was that a complete refusal of animation. And actually the medium had to prove itself, any medium used in the film, had to prove itself as it has a reason to be employed. So basically the film didn't create images, but actually used existent images. And okay, I will focus directly on the animation. So as I said, I didn't want to animate, but as we know, the images of the disappeared are these photo passports, and we all know that the photo passports, everyone knows that these images do not represent us. There are very specific regulations for these images where we cannot show the teeth, we have to have a clear front, and basically there is other things that represent us. And the only element that I had from the disappeared was this photo passports. What I wanted at the beginning, I didn't know what I'm doing, so the whole film is a process of discovery. So the first thing, I just wanted to look at one of these images from another angle of the camera, because the camera that shot represents the authority, so I didn't want to have the gaze of the authority on the missing person and shift to another angle. And this is how I started seeking the anatomy, like how we can shift from a frontal to a side view. And when I had the side view, I was struck. And again, what I was trying to find is the ownership of this image. This image should represent this person, yet there is still something missing. And the only element that I felt that would provide this ownership is time, to provide time inside the image for this person. It's his own time. But again, as I said, I didn't want to animate. So this question remained with me for almost 6 months until I revisited again the basic definition of animation, which is how to blow life in your image. And actually how it happens. So we do a drawing and then we retrace the same drawing 3 times. And then we place these 3 images in a sequence and we realize that it moves, there is life. So actually what happens, what does create this vibrancy? It's the failure of our hand to retrace exactly those lines. So it's this error in the reproduction of the image that is creating this life. And when I realized this, as I said, I was realizing this while working, I was okay. In this figure, I can blow time inside this side image of the disappeared in an attempt to provide ownership for him of his time and of his own image. Okay, I'll stop here.
No, this is very interesting. And to hear from you about like your work being a process rather than an intention. So how things reveal to us is also speaking about how the future reveals itself to us. It is always unknown where we end up going. I do want to shift the conversation towards a different scope. So I speak for a generation that did not experience the Civil War, thankfully, and hopefully no one does in the future. But how does one survive the present time with a memory that is at once incomplete and at another contradictory? In your opinion, what implications does that hold to the future? And what kind of future is there to expect when the grounds on which it will hold are unstable?
You're looking at me. Maybe I reflect on the films that were screened in order to bring your question into what we have watched. So actually, I was trying to understand the nature of the selection of the films inside this program and trying to find a certain substance in it. And what I felt mostly is that we are exposed to disasters, but actually each filmmaker that is present here has been exposed to a certain amount of disasters. For instance, I think Oualid is our oldest one. So he had the opportunity to witness the disasters from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and so on. And I think I'm the second, so I also had to witness. There are things that I didn't witness, and then there is the new generations with Soha and Elijah who witnessed other disasters. So I think there is this materialist condition of the four of us, which is just deferred of what we have witnessed or how many things. The other thing that is very present in these films is the proximity of our implication in the disaster. So we can sense distances in these films. The future is, since we're talking about the future, I will just push this far, because I think the only thing that we can imagine for the future is the upcoming disaster. So we're waiting for it, we're building for it, and we're waiting for it to happen. But what we have here is really very tangible, is the proximity of each of the films in the disaster. And this reveals, I think, several conditions of that exist in Lebanon and how we relate to disasters. We relate to disasters in a even that the country is very small, we can relate to them in a very different way. So there is a posture of the one implicated, there is a posture of the witness, there is the posture of those who represent the disaster, and I think we relate to these disasters very differently. Okay, I will stop again.
It's always a pleasure to hear from you. And I think I want to end with one question. I do have several more, but perhaps for the sake of time. So I wonder if you would see there being a possibility to consider the inaccessible and the unknown past, not as vacuum in temporal sequencing, but rather as knowledge that pertains its characteristic of fullness, but in a negative sense in this case. In other words, do you see a way to move beyond a materialist thinking whereby no body, no crime governs in logic and keeps one hostage of the past?
I will try to answer the way I understood.
I know this is a deep question. It's part of my thesis work, so.
Yeah. So there is a vacuum in the fullness of the past, but it's in its negative.
Yeah. So like instead of it being the absence being nothing, being some kind of vacuum, it is full but in a negative sense. And what can we do of that? Can't we turn the tables and make it something positive out of it?
Okay, I think that I had a very clear purpose in my film, and it wasn't about reversing the absence or bringing those absent. Or I even when I want to tell you that I'm not telling the truth in the film. So the film is not about saying the truth. But actually what I'm trying to do is to bring a critical thinking toward the reality or the visible reality we have, and in according to the disappearance or what is absent or the vacuum, what is important, I think, to bring is context. So the whole idea about this film is to bring context to those who were younger than me. And this came in Lebanon. I mean, this film is specifically, I did it for the local community in Lebanon. I was really imagining them present, and I'm trying to talk to them and to interest them in order to bring them context, because the vacuum is not the disappeared only, but it's all what happened, and it doesn't exist in any form of historical elements that we have. So what I have experienced with the younger generation is that they walk, let's talk now about Beirut, so they walk in Beirut without having the context of where they are growing up. There is signs of things, signs of violence, but they don't have the context. So again, the film is about bringing the context, and I think the matter of the disappeared is much more complicated. I mean, when we look at it in what we can do with it. I think it's a very blurry situation because it's very much generated by human rights thinking, which I think creates very blurry conditions in countries where there is no accountability or legal structures. I will stop again.
So thank you so much for your answer. I do want to move on to our second film, 1982, but Professor Baumbach, do you have any questions to address to Ghassan?
Well, I feel like we should continue, okay, and then I'll come back again.
So with 1982, my first question is, perhaps it would be like a surface level question, but I think there is a deeper story to it. Why do you go back to digging up old graves, and why not say the past is in the past? Why is that return to the past seemingly so crucial for you to move forward?
Hi. To sort of also parlay what Ghassan was saying, in Lebanon we have a collective amnesia, and we don't speak about our past. And when we consider the state of Lebanon today, I personally am one of these people that believe we're not brave enough about addressing our past. There is no future. And with 1982, it was so important for me to really bring the human narrative into this. People tend to trap history in a historical narrative, which is basically in the history book. But history books write about battles, they don't write about people. In effect, there's a very big difference between a war film and the battle film. And what I wanted to bring to the fore is to take us back to that moment in time that's very violent, where you feel a whole country's been raped, which is a very common feeling, I think, even today in so many countries. And we grew up brushing history under the rug and not talking about it. In the same context as the sand does, it's about forgetting. And we feel like there's this giant wave. Forgetfulness is this giant wave that's trying to keep us in our place. When we address these issues in cinema, in different forms, it sort of enables us to speak to them and perhaps bring a new generation into the conversation. With 1982, one of the main reasons I felt it was necessary is because I realized the young generation has no idea what happened before. And because nobody talks about it, because no one wants to remember it, but how can we move forward without memory? And I think film enables us that. It's a canvas. So that's...
That is so beautiful to hear from you. I do have some questions related to some, I'd say, artistic choices, but perhaps they are more deeper than that. I noticed that the opening of the film is its ending. And why did you choose to start from the end and engage in what I would describe as being this prophetic like practice?
You're one of the first people to realize that. So, yes, the film opens with the school, after the students have gone, and then we don't realize that we go back and tell the story of the school. It's because we're exactly where we are. I mean, in the context of our history today, this film, I mean, no film is ever made in a vacuum. And it's painful for us to see that 50 years have passed and nothing has changed in Lebanon. And as a matter of fact, 50 years have passed and nothing's changed in Palestine. And nothing's changed in Israel. Nothing. It makes us question what's the purpose. And effectively, I'm a pacifist deep down inside. And I just felt like that sort of very quietly lifts a mirror to us being able to realize that the past is the present and the present is the past, and then what? Are we ever going to be brave enough to talk past that point?
I also have a question regarding your choice of perspective in the film. Why choose the perspective of kids, and what is the significance of the childlike in your film?
What? Well, I was 10 when this happened, so the film is very lifted from my memory. And I felt I did not want to take the liberty of trying to perceive a different point of view of that moment in time and our history than the one that I knew and I was very familiar with. Even with regards to the adult narratives, we did have this split in people, adults around me, and I didn't understand too much of it. But I understood enough of these differences that they were clear. I came to understand them later, after I grew up. I just felt I wanted to be really honest to the time and place of that child, of who I was, what I perceived. And at the same time, it made me realize that I actually read in the adults and in the world much more than the adults thought I read. Because I was witness to a lot of these skirmishes in the family where there's an elephant in the room because there were people on the left and people on the right. They were never explained to me because the explanation was taboo. And I kind of wanted to put the entire narrative, and I think that's the reflection of Lebanon even to this day. Like wars and war zones and conflicts, even in the US, are about the elephants in the room that nobody wants to see. And this is really the crux of the film.
Aciah? I think Sam has a... Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, of course, Mr. Lahoud.
To give a statement here. In fact, war is not only about military actions.
Yeah.
So a state of war, we are living in a state of war since 50 years. And although the planet is, like we say, a small village, however, media decides to make people see whatever they want to see. So they highlight what's happening in a certain country whenever that agenda whenever this serves the agenda, the political agenda. So the people everywhere, either on the local level or even internationally, do not understand, in fact, what is the state of war. A state of war is sometimes if children are deprived from proper education, this is a state of war against children in a certain community. Even sometimes it comes from their own political system. Women who are not being able to receive a proper job or an equal opportunity in work is a state of war against women. So we are living in a state of war all the time, and the cinema, let's say the Lebanese cinema, is mostly, if not all the films that I have witnessed in the past 30, 40 years I have watched, are against war, and they somehow give an alternative view of what the media gives, because media in general promotes for hate speech, promotes for war, promotes for the authorities, because when the media covers only the stories of those who are in power, this is the war media. It's not the peace media for peace. The media of peace covers the stories of the people, how they perceive it, how they look at it. So unfortunately, what we see on media is showering the youth and the generation with images that does not let them see the reality that we want them to see, to reconcile with their identity, with their history, with their thoughts, with their with the other, in fact, with the different others. So the cinema comes to portray stories from the war, however, in a against war context. So this is why most filmmakers in Lebanon, especially those who has war images in their background all the time. So whatever story you want to tell in the past 40 years is signed by a situation that is connected to war.
Thank you so much for your intervention. It's much appreciated. So yes, I do want to address you with a couple more questions. The first, perhaps it's a bit bizarre for me to notice, but what is the significance of a pigeon-inhabited space? Where did the idea come from? What is the significance behind it?
That's a tough question because I really, it's part of my world. I mean, somehow animals tend to write themselves into my work without intention. And I kind of came to understand the pigeons later as suddenly like the pigeons exist everywhere in the script. And everybody thought they were just a texture, and they're not, it's a feeling. I think it's part of for me, pigeons are, or animals in that matter, for that matter, are part of the world, and they kind of tend to speak louder than we do about things that they express something inexpressible in a way. And you know how seasons change, and you know from the seasons, from like when the snails come out and anything like that. So when the pigeons first appear in the school, you know it's going to be unlike any other day. From a literary standpoint, for me, it's kind of like a harbinger. It's almost like the three witches. It's almost like, you know, and somehow animals exist in our world, and animals are always a mystery to us, and they're mythological, and they give us a feeling sometimes that we cannot put into words. And that's really what it is. And then they became clear to me later on, but because they're very dimensional creatures.
Of course, I can't but ask about like the character of Tigran, which I know Ghassan has also worked on the animations for. Could you just take us through the complexity of this character? Where did it come from? From like your childhood, even in the making of it, what is this character like?
Well, when I first started writing, it was very clear that this is where I wanted the film to go, like it was clear. In the context of the film, from a literary standpoint, it's what we call a Deus Ex Machina ending. And at the same time, it comes out of the child's imagination. There are so many layers to why Tigran exists. I didn't give Tigran the name. Muhammad Dalli did, the actor. But when I was a kid, I used to draw, and I wasn't a very good person, very good at drawing. And then I met Ghassan, and I realized he's very good at drawing. And it was, well, I mean, I used to draw robots when I was a kid. I was obsessed with them. And at the same time, to kind of take this a little further, like there's the whole mythology of Grandizer growing up and what that meant to us as kids. And it's we used to watch it. It's going a guy who's a very, I mean, the sub-themes in this, Grandizer was the protector of a planet, you know. And I felt like I wanted to echo all of this. On a filmmaking standpoint, it was necessary as well. From a story standpoint was necessary. And it really expresses, I felt, a lot of what we feel. Like, it's almost like the mythology and the prayer aspect of like something bigger than us coming and lifting us out of this. Technically, it was, I knew that the world I'm presenting is a very intense world, and I needed to pull this out, and I needed to pull the audience into the hope that I wanted the kids to feel and to be. And so there's so many layers to why Tigran exists, you know, because without hope and without magic, we can't move forward. And I really wanted the film to move forward.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Of course.
But
Yes.
you know, I just realized that it. No, sir.
No, I want to hear.
Please.
No. This is because I there's.
Because you mentioned the word hope, and this film ended in 2018 with this protection ball that was created by Tigran over Beirut, and actually 2 years later we had a ball, but it was a ball of
fire.
destruction. So it just came to
Yeah. I mean, that's the painful thing.
And yeah, I think the word hope is really very critical word now
To bring into focus. Yeah.
I honestly don't know where to go after this. I did want to turn to our first short film, but I think that Soha is facing some technical difficulties. Oh, no, wait. Soha, are you with us? Can you hear me?
I'm here.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. So,
But I felt like I was taking the screen, so I just stopped my camera.
no worries. So we are turning to discuss your film, and I do want to acknowledge that perhaps it is the most contemporary in its subject matter, touching on some very actual events that have happened recently. So firstly, why choose to make a film in action and amidst all that was and is still happening, and what does this film mean to you on an artistic level and on a personal level when trying to live through the events yourself?
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for having me, Aciah, and thank you for reaching out. The film means a lot to me because it was made in a mess. Like the circumstances that we had through doing of this film were horrific, and because of the team that I had with me, we were able to actually make it. So first of all, the idea of the film came from a feeling. A certain feeling I had, which I think every Lebanese had. It was the feeling of hope when the revolution started. We felt like finally something is going to change. This was the beginning of the revolution. We felt like, now something is going to happen and things will change. But of course, after seeing that even if we have facts proving that the government is corrupt, we need change, but nothing is happening. This changed my feelings from hope to disappointment, if I may say. And so I had to portray this feeling in this short film. So I created these two characters, Nai and Ghassan. And if you see the film, it starts on the dome, on the egg, which is up high. And they are dreaming, and they are hoping for change, and they feel like they can do something, they can change things. And we see them going down from the dome, and with this this journey of these two characters, we see the disappointments that's happening until the horrific thing happens. So, I talked a lot, maybe.
No, not at all. So what I sense from you is that there is this feeling of frustration in your work, and to be specific, it is not only frustration by the political scene on a governmental level, but rather there seems to be also some kind of frustration at the level of the people and the way that the revolution evolved. Is that true? Because in your film, there is some kind of frustration is complex.
And yes, so the idea came because of this feeling that I had about the revolution, the disappointment. But then, when I started writing the script, and like that revolution was something very important to me. And then when we were working on it, the explosion happened. And so everything stopped for me, and I felt like the revolution is nothing compared to what happened. And the film doesn't mean anything anymore to me. So we stopped everything, and to be able to continue working on this film, I had to introduce the explosion of the port in a way. So I found this link that, like I said, the corruption, that introduces the explosion that happens at the end of the film. So it was. So this film for me is all about my emotions, my feelings towards what's happening and what happened.
Well, certainly it is very touching, and I believe that a lot of people do feel the same way and share that kind of like disappointment. I did kind of find like a bridge between your work and that of Elijah, which we will be moving into discussing quite shortly. But Elijah ends his film by saying a revolution starts within oneself, on oneself, before coming into the world and completely reshaping it. How do you see your work in conversation with his words?
Yes, hi Elijah. I loved your film actually.
Thank you so much.
So and I saw the link. I saw how both of us are seeing things.
I still don't think we disagree.
What?
I still don't think we disagree. I think, yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page. I have hope for the future, but I'm still disappointed.
It's true. It's true. I feel that also, that there is a disappointment, but maybe my ending is a bit harsher. So, but I also tried not to have it as a full ending. Like, if a lot of people give me this feedback that they feel it didn't end, like they wanted to see more, to see what happened. Like, it didn't stop on a full ending, you know. But mine, I don't feel like it's hopeful. I feel like we're going through another phase that is harsher. So that's the difference.
So we have not yet accomplished the revolution on ourselves.
That's why I called the film actually في زمن ثورة, once upon a revolution and not the revolution, because it's just like one of these revolutions. Like I didn't want to highlight that it's a strong, like, you know, to give it the revolution that changed everything. No, it's just a revolution. It's one of these revolutions.
Thank you so much. I feel like now feels like a natural time to move into the discussion of us Lebanon, since we are drawing these connections already. So in us Lebanon, I do also want to like when watching 1982 and looking at how adulthood is being portrayed with Yasmin, George, and Joseph, I couldn't but draw ties to your film when hearing their debates. And your work is very poetic, I would say, and layered in its contextual meaning. But how does the relationship between, let's say, 1982's adults speak back to your points on concession and perspective? And would you please elaborate on that?
Well, concession and perspective are actually the whole film. I feel like I made the whole film for those 2 points. And as an intro, I would say to answer your question, today was actually probably the first time I've cried since the August 4th explosion, thanks to your film. No, thank you. No, strong men cry. And what was interesting is there's a point in your film, Oualid, that the boy's looking at Beirut from Mount Lebanon, and the explosions are happening, and then he has this imagination of like sort of him saving the city, you could say, because it's his imagination. And that was like the exact same scene that actually played out in my own life in the 2006 war, because we had that one after that. And we were in Mount Lebanon, and we looked at Beirut as it kind of burned. So, and why I'm mentioning this, why it's strongly related to the film and your question, is at the time there was this feeling of helplessness. And a lot of citizens have this feeling till today. It's like, yeah, I don't like what's happening, but what can I do about it? And the different forms, sources of power, you can say, that can be found in like any community, like let's say if it's money, connections, weapons, and so forth. The citizens who believe in a brighter future don't have any. And especially as a younger kid, I was like, what's the one thing, how do I make a change now? And it was art. That imagination that he had, it's like, art was the only form of power that was left up for taking, up for grabs. All the money's with other people, all the guns are with the other people. What's left? It's art. It's like nobody can take that away from a human being. So I would say after that experience, I had this question growing up. It was a childish question of why can't we all get along? But in the film, I actually wanted to portray a more mature question, which was, what is it that we lack? What's missing? Because there has to be something. We have to admit to it. There's something wrong. Not wrong, but there's something we lack that maybe other societies have. And after, I would say, years of contemplation, the most two that I arrived to were concession and perspective. I felt that us as Lebanese people, to call ourselves out, it would be those two things that we lacked the most. Perspective, because the more you get to know us, it's a very small country, but we live so close to each other, and you meet us and then you realize we're miles apart, even though our doors are right in front of each other. You can go to one universe to another in like a 20-minute drive. So we've been that way for a very long time. And every conflict is, I would say, a step closer to really understanding the other person's hurt. So perspective was what one of the characters mentions, and he's like, if only we could see the world through each other's eyes, then I think everything would be all right. And concession is, I think we have a long history of never surrendering, and constant siege or constant oppression that has happened in our own lives. And the Lebanese person has really gotten used to never surrendering. It's something he takes a lot of pride in, but to the point that we don't concede to one another. It's okay, you don't surrender to your enemy, but do you not surrender to your friend, to your loved one? That's when it becomes an inner conflict of, I'd rather be right than to form a relationship with you. And we have that in Lebanon.
Thank you so much for the explanation. And for it to be coming from you, someone who, like myself, we're still young, we haven't seen enough of this world.
Very old.
It's very deep to be hearing that from you. I also want to ask you more about like your words when saying white is peace, red sacrifice, and green is freedom and memory when describing your film. And what do you mean by memory being green, and why choose to pair memory and freedom, and how do you see this pairing functioning?
Well, actually, I can't say those are my words. I would say they're inspired by the symbolism of the Lebanese flag. After a quick Google on Wikipedia, I found those answers. But in summary, like what does the symbolism mean, especially for the cedar tree in the middle of our flag? Freedom is something that has always been used. It's like strongly connected to the cedar tree, and that's why it's connected to the color. I think in 1920, there was, like when Lebanon was established, there was a proclamation by the state saying, an evergreen cedar is like a young nation, despite a cruel past, oppressed, yet never surrendered. It shall, by its unity, it shall break all attacks. So it's always been like a symbol of freedom. And memory is because the cedar trees have lived so long ago. They say that the cedars of Lebanon know history more than the story itself. If the cedars could talk, they would tell us a history that man has never read. So they know our own history, and freedom is a very big part of Lebanese history, I would say. And the pairing of the two definitely results in freedom playing a very big role in the future.
I do want to end on with one more question, and that is, stylistically speaking, not only to have the Lebanese flag being that ending captured scene, but why choose to have water as being colored in red, and how do you interpret the man going into the red waters as honoring one's promise?
I would say the sea was we chose it so that our characters can have a place to reflect. And I would say at least personally, there's no better place than to sit on the beach and stare out into the horizon, or to have our characters look into the future, sort of. The forest, of course, behind them, and the whole scene, of course, is inspired by the Lebanese flag. We created a forest of cedar trees so it was supposed to be a white sanded beach, and the Red Sea. And it gave us a perfect excuse for the character to go into the waters in the end. Regarding your second question, in the national anthem, the first sentence is "We are all كلنا الوطن," we are all for the country, and it's a statement. Of course, it's not a promise. Now, one of the characters in the film, he makes it a promise, you could say, to justify his sacrifice. And when he says, "I need to honor my promise," she looks at him and she's like, "What promise?" He picks her up and he says, "The one we make every day." And then it's also portrayed as a question when he asks her, like, "Aren't we all for the country?" In a way saying, did we mean it when we said it? That's why he chose to make it a promise to justify the cause of making a sacrifice now that will save us a lot in the future.
Well, do we all mean it? That is something for me, myself, to reflect, and to what extent do we go, and what are the sacrifices that we make for Lebanon every day when we wake up and think about it? Just that thought, perhaps, giving it some moment of time to remember home every time, every day. Thank you so much. I think this is a good place to end the discussion of the films, but I do, although I do have plenty more questions, I don't really have that time. I do want to go back to you, Mr. Lahoud, with final remarks. I just hope that you can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my final questions are there directions that you see Lebanese cinema going in? And since you are in the field and you are hosting your own events and festivals, and you have seen how filmmakers what are the trends that you would say that are coming through? And lastly, perhaps, and this is a very important question, why is it important that we continue to make films in Lebanon?
We cannot claim that there is a certain trend in Lebanese cinema, especially in the cinema of the youth. But we can say that the cinema is mostly socially responsible. Like we can see that most filmmakers somehow want to reflect all the stories that they have and the statements that they want to say, as you've seen now with those four films on different levels. Like we have two professional films and two student films, and the four of them, they are saying a certain statement that falls somehow in the category of responsible filmmaking, where cinema reflects social issues, your history, your identity, and a certain social or human statement you want to say. And most Lebanese films that are produced every year, because as you said, Aciah, we organize a Bay Film Festival, and mainly like Beirut shows, which screens the films of the young generation, like short films, student films, or startups, new talents. So we can notice that most of the films highlight a certain social issue or a national issue. Definitely, the topic of the revolution and the Beirut explosion was, in fact, somehow material for filmmakers to talk about, because they were somehow shocked on different levels, and especially after the explosion, which was like a national disaster on all levels, especially on the psychological, emotional level of the young people and of everyone. So it like forced itself as a topic to discuss in films. As we said before, cinema has different roles. One of them is to preserve our national identity and our history. And it is more honest than history books, because history books are written, if written, are written by those who win the war. So they are always, they hold within the pages somehow a certain lie. So we can never know the reality of what happened, because those who lose the wars are not on the table to write the history. However, films, they are written by the people who lived the incident. And although they are not the reality as Cynthia said, so it's not that reality, however, it is a certain reality. Definitely, it is a certain reality, at least the reality of this person who is writing history in this film. And films are not only entertainment, and we cannot pretend that they are historical documents. However, they, in a certain way, they archive history. They give you a certain idea of what happened during this period. Like if we go back like 10 or 20 years ago, and we look at films that were produced during this period, we can understand somehow a better reality than the one reflected in history books or in media. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. I think.
Sure. I mean, I can say so. I mean, first of all, I want to thank you, Aciah, for organizing this great panel, and thank you also for wanting to include me, mainly because it, gave me the opportunity to be exposed to these really wonderful films and to, take a moment to reflect on them and have that occasion and context. I was also playing the game of trying to link the films in some form, and I latched onto some line in 1982. There's a moment where in the first third of the movie where one of the kids says, "Lebanon is not like the movies," right? Which has a specific context in the film in terms of romance and so on. But I was thinking of it in relation to all of these films in terms of a sort of question of, films being against the history books, as Sam was saying, but also all of these films I feel like are thinking about representability in some way, representability of this cultural amnesia, as you've talked about, or this accumulation of disasters, and yeah, and we see it in some form in the first short we saw too, in terms of Instagram. I mean, Instagram versus what's actually happening in the protests, and the sort of a certain kind of representation that comes out of a newer form of media. And then the second short, I think, maybe addresses this issue in some form of allegory, but I feel like we see it very explicitly in your remarkable film Erase too, which is very much about this gap, right, between official records and these other kinds of traces, right, which you're performing some sort of forensic documentation of, to think about, this issue of representability. So maybe it's more of a comment than a question, but I was wondering if people had thoughts on thinking about what it means to make a movie about Lebanese history, and how you think about this issue of representability when knowing where to start, or how to, what conventions you can use, or what form you can use.
I'm very much, I have a lot of problems actually about the representability, and this is why I have realized in the 2006 war that I will withdraw my artist career, because I felt that the only position that is brought for arts is the witnessing, and this form has been very much pushed by international platforms, international fundings, NGOs. Basically, all this boiling area has been pushed through its artists to witness and then to testify. And that's a core problem, because to whom we are testifying, and how can we be witnesses inside our disasters? How can we think that we are not those designated by death? And I think this has provided a form of a cultural period in the past, I don't know, maybe 20 years or a little bit less, where we do witness, and that's our position, and that's at the core of our problematic position toward the West, to who produces us in in most of our artistic productions and cultural productions, and also asks us to come and witness. As I said, those disasters that were expressed through these 4 films, what is very material in them is the proximity or the distance of the creator. So, in the case of Oualid, we could see him witnessing from a distance. In the case of Elijah, I felt nationalism and symbolism reveals the distance from which he is living the disasters, while the very interesting sentence that Soha just said, we were filming and then the explosion happened, and we had to include the explosion in our film, which is here it tackles the question, this disaster and its instant representativity, what does it keep from the disaster itself, once the disaster becomes a representation of itself? So I feel like we are losing the materiality of our existence for the sake of the representativity. And this is why I have refrained in 2006 from doing any creation until I had a very clear thought about how to address the problematic issue of the disappeared.
I mean, one of the things that's really important, and I think this is pretty uniform to these 4 films and a few others actually that hopefully will be making it into the world, is we have now we have a very major consciousness about creating films for our audience, for Lebanese people, as a reflection or in whatever form, be it, is, and I'm seeing this in younger people as well, and I saw it in all these films, where we're trying to be braver than skirting the topics, than skirting the issues. As a matter of fact, we have to address the issues head on. And it doesn't matter, there's no sensationalism in these works, because they try to represent us for who we are. And I think that I feel, and from what I'm seeing coming up in a lot of young filmmakers, is they are trying to represent us as who we are, not in order to service like a Western idea. Or there was a period of time, and I confronted this when I was trying to raise funding for 1982. I was asked to change the society, to make it a poorer school, to make it XYZ, and to create this kind of situation. Literally by one of the European co-producers who was gonna try to bring money to the film. And he's like, I'm like, but this is what it is. He's like, I know, but this won't, like, they will. I'm like, I'm not making a film, we don't want to be felt sorry for, you know? And for me, what these films do is they show us for who we are as equals with the rest of the world. And they pay homage, particularly Ghassan's film, to the power of memory and the necessity of memory and the respect of memory, which is something that is really, that we're trying to forget. And one of the sad things in the world today is that we're even trying to forget it in this country. So we have to remember the past, because that's why we can learn. And these films address a past that has never been addressed, that even our parents did not want to address. And hopefully it paves the way for a braver generation, because I do think we are cowards. And in our cowardice, we are stuck. And these films are our ability to express and to speak to this cowardice in the hopes that someone will step up and be less of a coward and change this a little bit.
Can I interfere a little bit?
Yes, Aki.
In fact, there is a long time discussion that is being alive in the cinema between filmmakers in Lebanon from different schools. And I think also if you have Lebanese people in the audience, they may also ask, is this Lebanon, the real Lebanon that we see in those films? And I've received a lot of times when I do discussions of films in different festivals from Lebanese mainly, that we don't want to see this image anymore about Lebanon. We don't want to see films about the war. We want to see the beautiful Lebanon. And we all know, especially if there is someone here that knows the country, that Lebanon is relatively still a beautiful country. And people who visit here, they love the environment, they love the food, they love the people. The people are generous, they know how to communicate with everyone. They are, despite all what's happening, they are still laughing and partying. So it's somehow there is a schizophrenia in the Lebanese society between what they live at night and what they live during the day. And also, if we have like a certain joke in Lebanon, we say, if on the same person, if you have 3 social media accounts, so On Twitter, there is a war happening. On Instagram, there is a party, and on Facebook, there is a funeral. So somehow we live this contradiction or this schizophrenia. Cinema is another story. Film, there are a lot of films that reflect the touristic side of Lebanon. But however, the cinema, the identity of the cinema, if we want to say that, if we want to claim that we have a Lebanese cinema, that Lebanese cinema should be reflecting the social, national issues, the pain we have, the statements we want to say, and it is somehow an educative tool. So if we, like for instance, now, despite all what's happening and all the things and all the war that we've lived, you can still see some young people, teenagers, or people in the early 20s saying that the only solution for Lebanon is to have war back. How can a person living in such a country say this statement? Simply because we are living in a denial and we did not learn from our history. And here comes those films that should be maybe taught or passed in schools for children just to show them what war was and what is the result of war. People leaving their country, a lot of people killed, displaced, miseries, and this is why the cinema wants to make people see this reality and learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intervention, Mr. Lahoud. I do notice that we are running a bit close to time, being 5:30. We still have some time, and I do want to open up for Q&A from our audience. So I see several hands. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be passing on the mic, but I will start from the back because that was the first hand raised.
I can speak loud. All right, first I'd like to say thank you so much to all the filmmakers. I mean, you make us so proud to be Lebanese because you guys are geniuses when it comes to this kind of stuff. You guys are geniuses when it comes to this kind of stuff. So very, very proud of you guys, and thank you so much for making us proud to be Lebanese. I think my first question is, it was going off of what I think Ghassan was saying before, but do you think that it's difficult to spark this type of interest with these types of films to the local Lebanese community in Lebanon versus the expats? Because I feel like نحن, sorry to the, بالغربة, I don't know how you say it in English, but نحن بالغربة, we have a more we have some type of feeling towards Lebanon where we're extremely nationalistic here. We're extremely close to it because we don't live there. And I feel like in Lebanon they don't have the same feelings that we do. So do you think it's difficult to present these types of films to the local Lebanese community because of these things? If that makes sense. If my question makes sense.
Actually, to present the film in Lebanon, the problem was more with what we have as platforms to present the film, but the problem was not to reach or the people reflecting on the film after seeing it. Basically what I did in Lebanon is that I carried the film and I went from small to project it in small rooms or in restaurants or in order to make the circulation of the film. I didn't wait for any cinema to screen the film because it was officially screened only 2 times. I had to circulate with it, and actually the reception was very profound. The discussions were, especially with the young people, this is, as I said, I meant to share this film with, so I went a lot to universities also. So it's not an emotional relationship to the film. So it's not those who are abroad and would feel, as you said, more nationalist or it's not about this. It's really about the material condition of the places we are living in.
And the other films too. If you guys, yeah.
Like 1982, we finished this film at the end of 2019. We were planning on releasing in 2020, but then the pandemic hit. So not many people in Lebanon have seen this film. As a matter of fact, we have screenings start coming up at the end of October. We're doing free screenings. But the film did exist on Netflix in Lebanon, and the response has been pretty incredible. People feel this film is very necessary. People feel this film speaks to them. Some people feel that this film hurts them because it reminds them of a moment in history. And I don't think they're afraid of that. What's really wonderful is that it has created the intergenerational discussion that I've intended, which means whenever a family goes and sees this film, grandparents, parents, and kids have conversations that they've never had before. And this was really my initial objective with this film, and I made it for Lebanon so we can actually speak to each other. And I made it as soft as I can, given the gravity of the situation, on purpose, so that it's open, so that people can walk in with open hearts. Yeah.
I do also want to mention that we all share that nationalism, even inside the country. But the difference is, like, when you live in Lebanon, it's not just love; it becomes a love-hate relationship, because it's you're trying to focus on building life, and it's like the country keeps kicking you. So you could say, I think a lot of Lebanese cinema is really it's rarely you'll come across films, independent films, that are like the intention is to like get to a global audience or money related. I would say it's always for a cause. Like, how do I change and affect my surroundings to make it better? Like, in a way, it's like if I save the world, then I'm kind of saving myself. So yeah.
There's another thing. It's like cinemas in Lebanon are in a bit of crisis as a physical entity. Like, we don't have the subsidies to actually put, like, we're really battling Hollywood films coming in versus our films. And we've been trying, and Sam, I believe, has tried to figure out some way of subsidizing, of creating a subsidy so we can have more of our Lebanese films come into movie theaters in Lebanon, and I believe there's been a lot of resistance to that. Right, Sam?
In fact, there is an alternative solution now, and people in the audience can also spread this. Now everything is moving. We are witnessing a paradigm shift in this field. So everything is moving to digital. And we don't think that we'll be back, especially in Lebanon, to the cinema soon. So the alternative will be as the way Ghassan worked, like we go to their homes, to their schools, and we take cinema to the villages, to the rural societies. People in Lebanon have to drive. Some people have to drive 3 hours to reach the theater hall. So I think we are. This will not be back easy. The solution or the alternative is digital platforms, and we have to build our platforms that can reach the Lebanese people in Lebanon and abroad. Maghreb and Morocco, they have this. They now launched a platform special for Moroccan films. And for international distribution, I think the audience here, you can tell everyone that to watch Lebanese films and series, good series on digital platforms. We need to raise the algorithm so the people, the platforms will request Lebanese product. Even if you are at home, just sitting, working, studying, whatever you have, even if you are busy, just run it. You have the subscription, you have paid it already. So just run a Lebanese production to raise the algorithm and to make people, the platform request more Lebanese productions.
Thank you, Mr. Lahoud. I am very much in awe of your passion and admiration for Lebanese cinema and your dedication to just spread the word for it and its productions. Moving on to the second question. Yes.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Rena. I'm a directing student here, and I was so inspired by these films. I think this is the first time I've ever seen Lebanese films ever in America. I don't know. It's incredible, and I feel very empowered in this moment, so I just want to thank you guys, Katir, first. My question is with regards to the current misrepresentation that happens regarding the Arab world, specifically in Lebanon. And you guys mentioned that, like, misrepresentation in history books and memory and just consciousness in social media. And I was wondering if you had any advice for new artists, me, about how to push through, like, oppression and misrepresentation, like, and just kind of push through that here in the West.
Just be true to yourself. Honestly, just write whatever you want to write without letting, you know what I mean? I mean, you know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just tell your truth. I think that's what it comes down to. And don't be afraid of it. You will get a lot of resistance, but strength comes in that.
Thank you.
Do not try to copy. Do not copy. The world does not want to see the stories from your pen and your camera. They want to see your stories.
Yes.
Should I wait for the mic or should I?
Yeah. Depends on, like, how loud you can project. Personally, I need a mic.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say, echoing the first question, thank you so much for putting the event together and for other panelists for sharing your time and your wonderful creations with all of us. So my question actually has to do with, I think we've reflected on, there's a theme that kind of cuts across all the things, all the movies that we saw before them, the theme of disaster, but taken from different angles. In the first movie we saw those that were disappeared, and the memories tried to be erased, then children, then the Thuwad, or the revolutionaries, across different socioeconomic classes. But then Elijah, coming to yours, if I understood correctly, they looked like Darak, or officials of the state. They were not. I thought with insignia on the sides of their shoulders, I assumed they might have been. So I was just curious to ask what reflections, if they were Darak, what reflections, if any, or thoughts you wanted to take us, to take away from that movie, because I feel like most of the Lebanese cinema is in opposition to the state, but not from within.
True. Very, very true. I guess that could have been made clearer. But the thing is, so there's no actually army suit that actually has the Lebanese flag on that point. So it's hard to show that, I would say, but they're not actually people. That's why they don't have names. The characters don't have names. It's actually an internal monologue. That's actually the point of the film. The one who sacrifices himself is actually the one who is kind of represents pride and stubbornness to justice only. And he has a bit of an ego. And at some point, she triggers him. And she's the more compassionate, loving one. So she triggers him when she says there's a psychological warfare that we're missing out on, that we're not paying attention to. And this could have been shown better, I would say, but it was very young one. Not as experienced to really show it on screen. But he gets triggered from the word war. And he stops listening to the rest of her sentence, and he puts his hand on the gun. And she tries to stop him. And all he can think about is, I need to aim at something, I need to shoot at something. Because we're, after everything, the Lebanese people have been through, we're faster to aim to reach for the gun than to reach for the phone, to work things out. But she loves him nonetheless, because we have that love for our country. So there's a form of acceptance, and she says, as much as this country brings joy, it brings tears. Maybe that's the pleasure behind it. Shows her way of I hate you, but I love you. And then there's this moment where he realizes it's oh, I'm the problem. And that's actually why he gets up there. It's an internal monologue inside the Lebanese person of, there's these two sides of, I need to protect my pride and I need to constantly not surrender. And there's, of course, the more human side. And the point of the film was the shift of power when he gives her the gun, to show that power actually belongs in the hands of the ones who are understanding, not the ones who just want to prove something to the world and protect us.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So I'm also Lebanese American, and I guess I kind of want to comment on this idea of nationalism now that I've heard about it, and I see some kind of elements of nationalism, especially in Lebanese cinema. I feel like we're so deeply nationalistic as a country. And I'm definitely somebody who rejects nationalism, specifically Lebanese nationalism, just because I think it's something that tries to unite a people that is so deeply divided. And in a country where you have such divided classes and you have people who live in extreme wealth as opposed to people who live in extreme poverty. And so for me, it's hard to accept this idea that we can all be united under a flag or this idea of Lebanon when we harm each other on such fundamental bases. And I guess I want to ask you if you ever kind of grapple with nationalism in Lebanon and something that you can't really represent the reality of like the Lebanese people or the Lebanese experience, because so many people live such different lives in Lebanon. The realities of Lebanese people are so different, and not even just Lebanese people. I mean, it's the treatment of Syrian refugees and Palestinian refugees and migrant workers. I mean, Lebanon has so many layers to it that I think it can't obviously be depicted in one film, but I often feel like only one experience is ever really mentioned. I guess as filmmakers, do you ever think about how you can try to, I guess, touch on many different groups in Lebanon who often suffer at the hands of one another?
Can I say something tangent to that? I think this is a very good answer for your question. When you said what kind of advice I could have, I think that's a very good answer.
Nationalism. Well, it's a very delicate term when it comes to Lebanon, actually. I feel like these films sort of try to stand outside of that ethos. And they're pretty unifying in the sense of they're almost, I mean, at least I know that in Ghassan's film, like there's no distinction between, you know what I mean? It's just about the human. And with 1982, I tried to some degree, and it's actually represented in Joseph's character, where it doesn't matter what part of the country, what class of the country, what anything, we're one country. I'm of the ilk that while I agree those differences exist in every nation, it doesn't mean we do not try to find a way to look after each other. So my ethos is that. So nationalism, yes, more like unity rather than nationalism. You know what I mean? So it's a very, very, I mean, it could be a very negative term, it could be a very positive term depending on how someone kind of perceives it. But I think like these films sort of tend to speak to the multitude rather than a singular, you know. That's at least my read.
There is something I want to add. I think nationalism is very important. I think us as artists, we can play a very big role in. We have a lot of, like, Lebanese people are they love their country, but everybody has a different idea of what that country is. The one thing that's missing is there's yet to be a vision that fits everyone. So a bigger picture. It's like if you talk to somebody's nationalism, he won't mention all of Lebanon. Something's left out, even though he doesn't know it. So we all do very love the country. It's the lack of there being one all-encompassing nationalism that everybody has learned and can speak of.
I just wanted to, actually, you said what I wanted to say. Having experience, like I just moved to the US in January, so I had to experience all of this firsthand. And what I realized during the revolution is that there is not one nationalism not one form of nationalism that exists in Lebanon. It's a series of different nationalisms combined in one country due to what we just saw in the film 1982, which was very hard to watch, by the way, because I had to experience all of that. But it was very interesting. But I do think this new generation does want unity, and they're breaking from what previous generations had told them, because our history is inherited. There is no core book that teaches us what happened, and the inherited history that's in one form of trauma other than whatever else we
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see a hand at the back, yes.
Should I wait or? Hi, I'm Lebanese American as well, and thank you so much for your films. I truly loved all of them. For Ghassan, I have one question for you. The wall that you stripped, was it a memory that you had from the past that possibly that wall would show what you wanted to see or find, or did you go through many walls to find what you wanted? And then Oualid, I have a curious question for you as to what was the casting process like in finding the children for the film?
Okay, the wall actually, a poster that was promoting the disappeared, or promoting not the disappeared, but an exhibition about the disappeared people, appeared in the city in April 2007, and I was struck actually. I was walking in the street and I was struck when I saw it. It was the first time I see the image of the disappeared displayed publicly in the streets, and as the film says, I'm acquainted or I have a relationship with one of these persons. So what happened is that I had to face the presence of this face in the street, and it was torn. There was missing parts, and it's a really very tiny image. So after the emotional moment of acknowledgement, I started healing the face with the pencil, so filling the missing parts. And in front of me appeared an image that was, it's an image that I did, but it felt much stronger than for me to understand what has just happened. And this remained with me for 6 years. So for 6 years I was, this incident didn't end. But again, I didn't have clear thoughts, but it was like there was something that I needed to resolve with that question. So after 6 years, on one morning, I just woke up and decided to take the cutter and to take the camera and to go search for that image without really knowing what will be happening after. And then things start happening. So I searched 11 walls. It was on the 11th wall. So it was, I used to go on Sundays very early in the morning in order not to have any encounter with, with military presence in Beirut. So it was until the next week that I had the apparition of actually this word that we see to all these exiled. This was the first element that drew me that okay, I'm there. I found it.
Casting process for the kids or the adults? The children. It was a very organic casting process. You know, when you're dealing with kids, you can't cast way too much in advance. I'll try to say this as fast as possible. I told my casting team, I actually started the casting process before we greenlit the film because I needed to make sure I have the kids. I talked to my casting director and we cast a wide net of different schools, different parts of the country, all classes, all religions. For me personally, the process was very important because I wanted to represent everybody in every religion and every class in this film. Cast a wide net, went to different schools, saw about 700 kids, From 700 kids, I whittled that down to 150. Those came for a second casting, which was a little more developed, and then from there I took 30 of them into a workshop. And that was a 6-week workshop. It was it was something that I'd been thinking about for a very long time, and I learned during the casting process and during the writing process a lot about kids. And that workshop wasn't like giving them lines or exercises or acting or anything, because it was more like watching films together. Like we watched Where's My Friend's House, we watched Oualid les Enfants, we watched My Life as a Zucchini, The Goonies, The Wizard of Oz and everything. And I didn't tell these kids what to think. And it was mostly hanging out and discussions and trying to have them tell me what they thought of these kids in these films and what they thought of the films, so that they kind of created their own bar. So I had to learn from them. About 3 weeks in, we designated the roles. Everybody who was part of this workshop ended up in the school. That's why you have the cohesion of the classroom. So they built friendships, fell in love with each other, all of that. And it was very wonderful. And much of it was rewritten with the kids. I gave them license even to tell me on set if I ever asked them to do something they wouldn't do. The scene where the kids run to the fence, I had always planned it on them just freezing, and then after we finished shooting, Wissam comes to me, Muhammad Dalli, Oualid, we wouldn't do this, we did this and this, and then I reshot the scene so that they would run to the fence because that's what he suggested. So I trusted them, and I gave them the ability to open up to me, and I never directed them standing up, I was always sitting on the floor. So that I didn't, it was very much an equal exchange, and that's what you see on screen. Most of the shots with the kids were 2-take shots, and they were so prepared, and they actually found their emotional spaces in such a beautiful way. As a matter of fact, Wissam had a crush on Abir during the shoot and took her out on a date. I was like, okay, yeah. So I was like, great. That's just what I needed. Anyway, so it was that really, kids, when you trust kids, they trust you back. And it was really important for me to make sure that their world is complete in and of itself. And I realized during the course of my preparations and studying kids' behavior that even if there was no adult in the room, their world is complete. The moment an adult even walks through the room, even if they don't interact, the kids become kids. And I really wanted to make sure that I captured the kids in the moment when the adult is not in the room, because that's their truth. And I feel I only found out that that worked when the film started touring kids festivals all over the world, and I was like, what? Because I didn't think I made a film for kids. The first festival that basically programmed it and put it in a slot for 8 to 12-year-olds. And it was the most rewarding Q&A I've ever had. Yeah. Pleasure.
I think we have time for one more question. So, yes, of course.
Salam. I only saw the first 2 films, and I just want to say, Ghassan, what you did with your film reminded me of what Roberto Bolaño did with the novel 2666 in terms of memorializing a people that had gone through severe oppression and were sort of erased from history. And I could literally feel my goosebumps in my face, which had never happened to me before watching a film, and it was super trippy. And Oualid, your film, to me, like, I was crying at different points, and I could no longer really know why I was crying. I was just crying the entire time, and I don't think that's ever happened to me watching a movie either. So you both made amazing films. I had not seen the other 2. What I wanted to ask was, in the relation in Arab cinema and television between nativity and diaspora, how do you think Arab filmmakers in the West could best serve nativity in terms of thinking about how the West is very deeply implicated in the oppression that our Arab nations face back home? And I ask this as a writer and director myself that's studying here. terms of like America's role in oppressing Arab nations, how do you think Arab filmmakers here can center Arabs that are in nativity back home and their narratives to best sort of use film and television as a medium to sort of like bring light to things? And I ask this given like I just watched like in the third season of Rami, Anna-Marie Ghassan, the Palestinian director, just directed an episode, and it was incredible to have like her vision as a Palestinian brought to that show and to use that to center Palestinians in Palestine. So that's like what kind of sparked the question.
Yes. All right. I actually think it's as I regard myself as an Arab filmmaker in the U.S. as well. I think it's about point of view, right? It's about being able to actually be honest to the point of view that you know is truthful. Like where the pressures to compromise the vision and to declarify or to soften the narrative is very high here. And you really just have to stay the course and put your foot down, and I think Anne-Marie Ghassan does that, and she's an incredible filmmaker. And also I think Shireen Davis to some degree also tries to do that. And we all communicate, and we all work together, and we all try to support this. Like, no, we have to tell our truths, because the pressures to augment it are very high. So you really have to look inside, and you have to speak to something that you know, and to the emotional truth that you know. And what's most important is the emotional truth, you know. And 1982 kind of goes straight for that, which is why probably it was emotional. But you just, if you have a narrative, like, don't compromise your narrative. Don't start with what you want to say, and then figure out the right, I would say, the right vernacular, visual vernacular and oral. But yeah, it's not that difficult. You just have to stay the course, you know, and don't be afraid, and you will get questioned left and right. And a lot of people will make you doubt things, but you know it as a filmmaker, you kind of know what you're saying. And sometimes it's not clear to people, it's not clear in the words until after it's done, you know? And then people, oh, that's what you were going for, you know? So, does that somewhat answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.
Me, I really don't have an answer for your question. I'm unable to face the Lebanese authorities. How could I imagine to face the United States?
So I guess, well, sadly, this is how we will be ending our.
There's one more question.
One more question? Sure, of course.
No.
No questions? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, I wanted to thank you all for joining us today and for being here with us this afternoon. For those who have been here for the entire day, it truly means the world to me and to everyone, who has worked so hard to put this event together. I do hope that walking out, you keep Lebanon in your thoughts and in your hearts and your prayers. And thank you so much for panelists for joining me today and accepting my invitation. Whether in person or on Zoom. Mr. Lahoud, I know it is quite late in Lebanon, and I really appreciate you for staying with us online.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for this experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And once again, I do want to acknowledge and thank our sponsors for today, without whom this event wouldn't be even possible. And thank you, Professor Greg, for always being there, supporting me and guiding me throughout the way of programming this event. Thank you all, and have a nice rest of the afternoon and have a good day.